Welcome to Beauty and the Mess. We are here with Dr. Russell Kennedy, otherwise known as the Anxiety Doctor. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Robin. Thanks for having me.
I was trying to think back to when we met, and I think it was like 7, 8 years ago. Is that right?
I think it was at the Hay House conference, wasn't it?
It
Yeah, it's
was.
in San Diego in 2012.
Yes, yes. So quite a
Yeah,
while.
yeah. Time
Yeah.
flies.
Yeah. So I know at that time, I know you were doing stand-up comedy. Are you still doing
Yeah,
the
I still
comedy
do it.
as well?
Yeah, yeah. I've got a Christmas gig to do. I don't do it as much, but I got a Christmas gig to do. Maybe I might do a few, but right now, so I've been writing some new material and trying to get that going for sure. But I'm also writing a book right now, so it's one of these things when you're writing a book, like anytime outside of writing the book, it's like I should be writing the damn book. Like I should be doing it.
I know
But
that
the more
feeling.
I do it, the more I burn out. It's like, okay, I've read this paragraph 15 times. It's not going to change. It's not going to change on its own. You've got to have to do something. So you got to go do other things is basically what I'm saying. So stand-up is
Yes.
a great way of, accessing a different part of my brain than the thinking part for sure.
I love that. So take me through your journey from really like the last several years on how you became known as the Anxiety MD and what you're writing your new book on as well.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I've dealt with anxiety basically my whole life. My father was schizophrenic, so growing up with him, I never really knew what I was going to get. And my friends, a couple of my friends have alcoholic parents, and it's a very similar story. You never know what you're going to get when you walk in the door. So you learn how to be very hyper vigilant and try to anticipate everything. But you burn yourself, your brain burns yourself out. So what I've done over the last kind of 25 years or so is study I got a degree in neuroscience and developmental psychology and medicine, as you know. And I really focused on what is this thing called anxiety? What is going on in my mind and my body? And then I did some ayahuasca and LSD, not to get high, but just to try and see if I could see another perspective on my anxiety. And I really did.
Mhm.
Found it was more in my body than in my mind. And then I've been focusing on, okay, how do I heal that from a body-based perspective and a mind-based perspective? So I think in modern psychiatry and modern psychology, they deal mostly with talk therapy, mostly with mind things. But what if the problem is rooted in our body? What if we carry this anxiety in the cells of our body? We know the heart has 40,000 sensory neurites. It has kind of a brain of its own. We know the gut has a brain of its own as well. So why not address those parts of anxiety as well? Because I know when I get anxious, my whole body gets inflamed. So I'm trying to combine my, highly academic medical doctor part with my highly kind of ethereal, flaky, living at a temple in India for a while part of me. So there's two, and they fight. And then the humorous part of my brain fights, gets in there and starts teasing both of them. And it becomes a bit of a hell in there. But it's kind of fun. But what I did was I tried in the last sort of 7 years to create a program for people who struggle with anxiety to look at it in a very different way. And when you look at it and when you actually address the source of what is really the problem, people get better a lot faster. So
Mhm.
that's a bit of a ramble, but that's basically what I've been doing.
I love that. So tell me a little bit about how you started with your own journey and what was that like for you?
Well, I think I've probably seen 15 psychiatrists, maybe 4,000 psychologists. I don't know. I'm exaggerating, but I saw a lot of practitioners. And I wasn't really getting a lot better. I was talking about my father and the wounding and blah, 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 all that stuff. And I wasn't really getting a lot better. And I was really at the end of my rope about 7 or 8 years ago, I guess around the same time I went to San Diego. And just like, what am I going to do here? Because it was like I was at the point where I thought, well, if this is what life is, it's not really worth living, right?
Right.
So I did some LSD, and basically after I got back from India, and what the LSD showed me was this anxiety was in my body. So I started really focusing on the alarm that was in my body, and for the first time in my life started to get some relief from what I called anxiety. So I divide anxiety up into two things. There's the anxiety of the mind, which is painless, which is the thoughts that we have in our mind, which are basically just words.
Mhm.
And they're painless until we believe them. And then when we believe them, the body reacts to that belief exactly the same as it would if the situation was actually happening. So I thought, well, let's cut out the middleman. Let's deal specifically with the body. So breathing techniques, just focusing on the alarm itself, localizing it in your body, because a lot of my patients, when I would see them, I'd say, well, where do you feel the anxiety in your body? And they wouldn't know. It's like, no, it's in my head. It's
Right.
like, no, let's just sit. Okay, let's just imagine, your brother was beating you up from the time you were 12 till you were 16. Imagine going back into that situation. Where do you feel that in your body? And they go, well, my throat feels kind of tight and my chest, I feel this burning pressure in my chest. It's like, well, let's focus on that a little bit. Let's breathe into that and let's just see what comes of it, you know? And then I get people more comfortable with that issue, because what I do believe, and what I did sort of come to realize under different psychedelics and other things too, is that part of me, that alarm that's in my body, is really my younger self. It was really the part that was sitting at the window watching them taking my dad away to the hospital. So it was my younger self asking for my attention. So anxiety in a way is asking for your attention. And if you had a child in front of you with their hands up, like pick me up, and then you kind of pushed them away and went off and went on Facebook or distracted somehow, that voice is just going to get louder. And that's what happened with my patients. They would just, the anxiety, the alarm in their system would just get louder and louder and louder as a way of trying to get their attention.
Mhm.
So that's really what I came up with. And really what I focus on is, okay, well, let's understand what happened. It's really important for me to have a coherent narrative of what happened to me, and the fact that I couldn't trust my dad, even though he loved me and I knew he loved me, but he was just psychotic at points. But also in my body, being able to learn how to trust myself. And the other thing about me is I got very, very good at reading other people, which a lot of people with anxiety are very good at reading other people, but not so great about reading themselves. So I
Right.
really learned, and I teach people how to read themselves, how to basically give them the attention, give that part of you, the alarm, the attention that it needs. And then when that alarm gets the attention, it doesn't need to flare up so much anymore.
Mhm.
So, and then the mind gets clearer. There's a whole bunch of benefits to it. So my big thing is, I think that we're attacking anxiety in the wrong way
I,
in North
I
America with all
agree.
this talk therapy.
Yeah. When you were discovering that information on the LSD or whatever it was that you were, processing, were you seeing a visual image, or was it more like a knowing and information that was coming to you?
Yeah, that I can't really explain, but basically, when I was in the height of the LSD, my mind was completely fractured. It was just everything was colors and, things moving around, and I couldn't really get a fix on anything. But when I was coming out of it, I had this sense, and I don't even know if it was words or it was a message, that my anxiety was kind of in my solar plexus area. It's like, essentially, it was like what you're searching for in your mind is actually in your body. And then as I was coming out of it, and it was wearing off, it was getting a little more concrete. So it really gave me this message, like, you really need to focus on this area of your body, because that's your younger self that's asking for your attention. And that's why your anxiety is so painful, is because you've been ignoring it. You've been distracting. With me, as you know, I'm a stand-up comic and a corporate speaker and a yoga teacher and all this stuff. So I did all this stuff to try and escape from that connection with myself. And as kind of woo-woo as that sounds, it really, once I decided to connect with myself, I could still be a yoga teacher and a comedian and all that, but I could do it as a whole person, as opposed to trying to run from something and try to escape the pain. I had to really go at it. I often say you have to feel it to heal it.
Right.
And that's what I had to do. I had to go in and feel it, and actually make friends with it. Make friends with
Right.
the part of, make friends with my anxiety, essentially. It was basically making friends with my younger self is what I was doing.
Right. I love that. And so, like, how do you help people understand how to become aware of that for the person that is not aware that, like you said, when people will say, no, it's in my head,
Mhm.
how do you help a person to start understanding that?
Well, the first thing I have to do is regulate their body, because if your body is active, you're in survival brain, and when you're in survival brain, you don't learn anyway. So usually what I teach people is this little thing called, am I safe in this moment? So when you're stressed, when you're anxious, when you're worried about something, say, am I safe in this moment? I know I've got to talk in 2 days, and I know I've got a medical checkup in a week, but right now, in this very moment that I'm in, am I safe? Like right here talking with you, am I safe? It's like, yeah. And for some of my patients, this is the first time they've allowed themselves to actually believe that they're safe, because they've always leapfrogged to the next trauma, right? So they go through the medical test, it comes back normal, and then they would transfer all that worry onto, okay, I've got to give this presentation at work. So they would never actually give themselves this place of safety. So that's the first thing I do with people, is give them this place of safety, which is just saying, are you safe in this moment? And, the ego will try and tell you, no, we've got this and we're in trouble. But really, in this moment, are you safe? Like in the middle of the night when you wake up in a panic, can you just say to yourself, am I safe in this moment? And then realize that you are. And then something like focusing on your breath, focus on some sort of sensation, because sensation will bring you into the moment. Your thoughts will always project you into the future, and there's no grounding in the future because it hasn't happened yet. So we really need to sort of ground into the moment. And when you ground into the moment, you've got a place to move from. But if you're in your thoughts all the time, and your thoughts are almost always, well, worry is always future based, you're not stable. So when you say, am I safe in this moment? And you focus on sensation, like I get people to rub their fingers together, or touch their thumb and their fourth finger together, or rub their chest, or anything that pulls you into sensation, because you can only feel in the moment. That brings you into the moment, and that gives you a power that you don't have when your mind's, and it's taken you off into some other realm.
Do you find that more effective for some people than the breath work?
Well, that's I use breath work too, but I think initially when you're in alarm, you're basically, I mean, we have a fear bias in our brain from a neuroscience point of view. We have a fear bias in our brain. So when we get into alarm in our system, we go into that survival brain.
Right.
And that survival brain makes us breathe very shallowly, and it makes us look around for trouble, and it makes us see things that aren't there. So what I try and do is get people into their body first. Am I safe in this moment is a good start, and then focus on your breath, and then savor your breath. Savor the sensation that you're in, because that brings you into the moment. And now when you focus on sensation, the 100% of your brain that was focused on these horrible thoughts or this worst case scenario, say now only 50% of it is focused on those horrible thoughts, and now 50% of it is focused on sensation. So now you feel like you've got a little bit of power in the situation, whereas before, when your thoughts just took you away, you had no power at all. So it's getting into that sensation, which grounds you in the moment, and then you can decide at that point what you're going to do, and then your brain comes out of survival mode. When your body relaxes, your brain comes out of survival mode, and then you get your prefrontal cortex back, and then you can start thinking rationally again. And the other thing I say to people is, when you're anxious, there's no point in thinking. Like, there really isn't any point in thinking, even if you're trying to think positive thoughts, because as soon as you think, you start opening the door to all the other negative thoughts, and the negative thoughts will always come back in. You may start with, oh no, it's going to be fine, it's going to be good. If I say to you, like, don't think of a pink elephant, of course you're going to think of a pink elephant. You can't not do it.
Right. I can visualize it as soon as you say that.
Yeah. But if I say, put your hand on your chest and rub your chest, and maybe rub your hands together, warm them up, put them over your eyes, get into sensation, that pink elephant thing just starts to fade away. So thinking is one of the things, like, we do so much thinking. We worship the brain in this society, in North America. And it's just making us sick, because the thoughts that we're exposed to now in our society are toxic. And then we're eating more and more of these toxic thoughts. And as we eat more of these toxic thoughts, we need more of the toxic thoughts. Whereas if we just get into the feeling sense, which is, part of what life is about, is just feeling things. If we get into the feeling sense, we can start seeing a distance between, do I have to believe these things that I'm telling myself? Otherwise, you just think the thoughts are you.
Right.
We get focused into thinking I'm my thoughts. And, and then the question I love asking people is like, oh, who owns those thoughts? Are they yours? Do you own those thoughts? Can someone go in and say, I'd like to buy those thoughts from you? No, it doesn't work that way. You can just see them as, the late great George Carlin used to call thoughts brain droppings, which is a great, I think that's a great thing, because if you believe them, your life's going to get kind of crappy, and that's what happens too. And we get these thoughts, and we automatically believe our thoughts. But if we're grounded in the feeling state of our body, and I don't want to look like some sort of yoga guru, because I know we need thinking too, but it's this combination of allowing your mind and your body to work together, as opposed to constantly putting 90% of your attention in your mind, which is going to drag you down. And then there's nothing left over for your body, and your body is where you feel life. Your body is where you feel energy. Your
Yeah.
body is where you feel things.
Yeah.
So,
It's true. And, when we reconnected, I was really excited to hear about your work because it's similar but different, obviously, to what I was trained in through Dr. Coletta Long, which is, going into the body to feel where you're storing your tension and then a energy release process to release it. I guess I've been doing that for about maybe 6 years or so. And you were the first person that is receiving the results that you're receiving through the mind and body connection.
yeah, as a medical doctor too, like it's pretty
Right.
unheard of. Usually we're
It
trained.
is.
Yeah, I burned out of medicine because I wasn't allowing my patients to feel enough.
Mhm.
I was
Which
medicating.
is
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so take us through for the people that, that are still really in the Western world having a difficult time understanding that. Can you explain a little bit more on that?
What I would direct that into is if you're struggling, find the alarm in your body. You're not, yeah, one of my favorite sayings is, you can't solve a feeling problem with more thinking, you know? So it's one of those things is like get into the feeling. But a lot of the problem is like when we were younger, if you had trauma when you were younger, going back into the body is not felt to be safe. But you can go back now. The place has changed. You're not 8 years old anymore. You're not
Mhm.
worried that your father's going to be crazy or your mother's going to be drunk or whatever. You're not there anymore. But the amygdala makes you think, because it has no sense of time,
Right.
that you're back there. So it's really important to ground yourself kind of in the moment that you're in. So it's finding your alarm is basically what I get people to do, is like,
I love
okay,
that.
go into what's really stressing you out. If it's you got to give a conference or a talk at a conference in 2 days, imagine yourself doing that, and then where do you feel that tension in your body? Like, where do you feel that? And really try and say, okay, well, it's it feels sharp, it feels like a pressure, it feels like a pain. Try and isolate it, and then just put your hand on it and just basically try and connect with it. Because really that's what it's asking you for. And once you connect with it, then you start opening up a whole new world of, therapeutic options, as opposed
Mhm.
to just trying to fix it with your mind. Because if the
Mhm.
problem's down here and we're up here talking about it all the time, up here is not where the problem is. Down here is where the problem is. So we have to deal with this part as well as the mind as well. So what I would tell people is, can you localize this sense of alarm in your body? And then can you make friends with that? It's not your enemy. Anxiety is not your enemy. Can you make friends with it? Can you develop a relationship with that part of you that's hurting and say, hey, I feel that you're hurting. What do you need from me? Like, how can we connect? Can I, take you for ice cream or whatever? Like it's basically just developing this new relationship with this part of you that's asking for your attention. That's really what it comes down to. So, if you're
I love
dealing and
it.
struggling right now, is find out where in your body you're feeling it, because it may not be in your head at all.
Mhm. I love that. And has this work also brought you into helping people understand their relationships, types of relationships, and how people are really
Yeah.
in communication with themselves and their partner?
Yeah, because your relationship with your partner could be no better than your relationship with yourself. The
Right.
relationship with yourself dictates the relationships you're going to have. So if you've got a part of yourself that you're pushing away all the time, because it hurts, how do you think you're going to be in an interpersonal, in a marriage, or as a parent, or whatever? Like, that's going to come up. And unless you can kind of join your mind and your body back together and be the best partner, parent, whatever you can be, then your relationships will get better. Or if you're having an argument, with your partner, one of the things that I wrote about this morning is like sometimes when I get into an argument with Cynthia, I have this picture of her when she's 5 years old. And I look at that picture because sometimes that's who I'm dealing with. And she's dealing the same thing with me. So our
Right.
two our two
All of us.
5-year-olds, are bickering away at each other. And then all we really want to do is be seen and heard.
Right.
So it's basically, she'll say to me something like, you don't do enough around the house, which I don't. But, and I'll say, and I can say, well, I do all this other stuff and whatever, and then the fight's on, right? But if I say, I can really understand why you would think that way. I can really understand why you would think that way. Immediately it diffuses her. I feel like I come back into my feeling state, And then she comes back into a resource feeling state as well. And then we can talk through it. But if it's like, well, I do this and I take Michael on the thing and we go to guitar and then the fight's on. Then there's two 5-year-olds just banging away at each other. So it's a matter of really developing that relationship, that compassionate relationship with yourself. And even when the battle starts, like sometimes if she'll and we don't fight that often, but I'm saying it's when it comes up, sometimes I'll just put my hand on my chest and just sort of take 2 seconds before I respond and go, okay, connect with yourself first, and how are you going to react? And usually what I'll do once I connect with myself and I get out of my survival brain, I say, I can really see how that would, I can really see, and I don't have to agree. And sometimes I'll say that I don't agree necessarily with what you're saying, but I hear what you're saying. I hear that you don't think that I do the dishes enough, or that I take the garbage out enough, or whatever it is. I really hear that that's what you're saying. And then once the other person is seen and heard, their body they go out of fight or flight and they go back into a sort of a resourced present moment state. And then you can have an honest discourse about something, as opposed to your two inner children just battling away at each other. And I've been married 3 times, so I know exactly, how the first 2 went, and how that didn't work out, and then how much better it's going now. So that's really what it comes down to, is knowing yourself, connecting with yourself first. And then, the other thing is just seeing yourself as innocent. There's nothing you've done that hasn't been done millions of times before you. There's no affair. There's no addiction. That hasn't been done millions of times before you and won't be done millions of times after you. So it's learning that, we're innocent. We develop these negative coping strategies because usually of childhood trauma, usually of wounding that our brains can't quite handle. So if you're rejecting yourself for that, you're not developing a relationship with that part of yourself, and it's going to imprison you. The more you resist something, the more it imprisons you. So making friends with the part of you that rejects you, like if you say, oh man, I look fat today, it's like, can I find that part of me that thinks that I look fat, and go, okay, why do you think I look fat? Well, it's like, where does that come from? Like, have a relationship rather than just accepting it and going and then having it ruin your day. Like, talk to that part, find that part that says you didn't do this properly, or find that part that rejects you or thinks that you didn't do something, and have a conversation with it, just like an equal back and forth conversation with it. Because as long as it stays hidden in the shadows and it just beaks away at you, you'll never overcome it. You'll never get past it. But developing a relationship with it and go, yeah, I can see why you think I kind of look fat today. I can see how that would happen. And then just see what comes back. It's like, well, yeah. It's like, yeah, I understand. Yeah, fair enough. Because that diffuses the negative energy, because the negative energy keeps you locked in that thing. So, and we tend to say the same things to ourselves over and over and over again. So develop a relationship with the part of you that says, you're looking overweight these days, or, I'm going to be 60 next year. So I think, oh God, today I look so old, I look so old now. And then I look pictures of myself when I was like 20 and I look so good then, so, and then it's like, well,
You're gonna be 60?
Yeah, next year. On my birthday,
No way.
Yeah, I turned 59 on November 29th. And then next year, I'm getting myself all psyched up for it, right? I'm getting myself all psyched up. So, I mean, I don't feel that. I mean, I really don't feel it. I try and work out. I try and keep myself healthy and that kind of stuff too. And I've got good genes. Like my grandfather lived to 100 and my mother's already 86 and
oh my gosh, wow.
She's on fire, so
I love it.
I've got good genes that way. But it is one of those things where, you kind of, and the thing is, like, I'll go to the mirror and I'll say these things to myself and then I'll laugh. Like sometimes if you laugh, no, really, like physiologically, when you laugh, you change the chemistry of your brain, and things that were bothering you before, even if you're just doing it academically, and this is where laughter yoga comes from, right? Like they go into these like laughing sessions for 15 to 20 minutes, and then the whole world looks completely different because your whole neurochemistry has all changed.
Yes.
So even if you're thinking about something that really bothers you, and then you just force yourself to laugh. And I'll tell you a little secret. Before I do any podcast, I go on YouTube and I watch the 40-year-old virgin, the waxing scene. I laugh every time. Like I laugh at every time. I laugh so hard at that, and then I'm just in this complete like focused, ready to go before I do any podcast, that's what I watch. I watch that 40-year-old virgin, and
I love that.
it's my favorite scene of any movie.
I remember years ago. I mean, probably like 12, 13 years ago, I was, I had a coach give me, a homework to sit and laugh for 10 minutes.
Yeah,
And I already laugh a lot.
yeah,
And that was like really hard to
yeah.
do.
And the other
Uh,
thing too is tears. Like tears, laughter and tears both activate the parasympathetic nervous system, right? So we have two wings of the autonomic nervous system: the sympathetic, which is fight or flight, or the accelerator, and the parasympathetic, which is kind of rest and digest, which is kind of like the brake, right? So as soon as you laugh, you take yourself out of this sympathetic activation, which is, this negative view of yourself or whatever, and then it turns you into this sort of parasympathetic, and then you will see things that are more positive about yourself because you're in this more positive neural state. And whatever state you're in, that's how you're going to see the world. And it's a matter of how can you change. And tears are one of those things that it doesn't, tears, when you cry about something, it doesn't change the actual event. Like if someone's died or there's a
right.
relationship breakup, but it does neurologically change your perception of that event. So, and I think that's why men suffer so much in our society, is they don't have that ability to cry and allow those tears to kind of solidify some of the problems, the internal struggles that they're going through. So they get into violence, they get into drugs, they get into alcohol, they get into porn, they get into all this stuff that tries to, again, take them away from that part of it, part of them that's really asking for the attention. And it's just trained out of us, to not appear weak. And that is a huge, and I have it just as much as anyone else. So when I tell people that they should cry, of course, there's a bit of me that wants to have a bit of a seizure, being kind of an alpha male. It's like, yeah, if I'm telling my buddies, you should really cry about this, it's like, they don't really respond to that very well, but it works, it works. Sometimes with me, like I'll watch, my thing is I watch dog rescues, like dogs that are like overseas or whatever, and they're like emaciated or whatever. If I need to break through something, if I'm getting frustrated with something, I'll watch these dog videos, and then the tears will start to go. And it's amazing how much better that allows you to sort of feel, and it makes you better at handling stuff day to day, because now you've seen a pathway in your own mind to diffuse a lot of this negative energy. Now, I'm not saying go out and start crying every day, for sure, but there are points where Cynthia will say to me, I think you need to watch one of your dog videos because I think things are starting to back up on you. And of course we resist and that kind of stuff too. And like, it'll take me 2 or 3 weeks to actually do it, but it does make a huge difference, and I think that's why women are more psychologically healthy than men are, because I think they're socially allowed to cry. And I don't think you have to do it on TV, or you don't have to do it in public or whatever, but just allow yourself, because it's a physiological release, just as laughter is. Laughter and tears are both in the same kind of wing, in that they activate that parasympathetic nervous system. So
Mhm.
now I've gone on sort of the internet saying that I like to cry. That's great. Pretty cool.
It's so helpful though when you're working with men versus women. Do you find it harder to help men with their anxiety over women, or is it pretty
Initially,
equally
yeah,
difficult?
initially until they trust me. But it's funny because men are so want to release a lot of this crap that they've been holding on to.
Yeah,
So once
yeah,
they trust me, it's a lot easier. Women, it's sort of I help them immediately a lot, and then it kind of tapers off as their old ego structures start to come back in again. But
right.
with men, it's more of a sort of a, like, it's almost like a switch. With
Yep.
women, it's sort of this linear progress, at least initially. But men, they really need a place to release their shame. I think men, we feel so much shame just for being men, because whenever there's a mass shooting, it's never a lone gun woman. It's always a lone gun
Right.
man. It's always a man.
Right.
So we wear that as men, and I think a lot of people don't understand that as a species. I mean, that's probably not the right term, because we're both men and women are both the same species, but as a group, we hold the shame of all the people that have, the rapes and the horrible things that men do, and the Trumps and all this stuff. Like we
Right.
wear that. Like we
Right.
wear that stuff. And especially if you're a white male doctor, like, you don't get any more privilege than me. Like, this is it. Like, this other than Brad Pitt or movie stars or whatever, you don't go through life with a whole lot more privilege than a white male. Although, I've had some anxiety in my life that has taken me to the edge of, not wanting to live anymore. So it's not like I don't deal with stress either, but I really see the struggles that people of color and of sexual orientation, I really see what they go through, because because I'm empathic and because I was a doctor for so many years. And the reason why I think I retired, one of the reasons was that I did feel their pain. Like I did, and it was just too much to see, 25 people, 30 people every day and actually feel their pain. And I just couldn't do it anymore. So now I do this, and I like doing this so much more than, being one-on-one and prescribing medications and that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. So, have you found like people who are empathic, is their anxiety typically higher?
Yeah. Yeah.
Big time.
'Cause-
Yeah.
yeah, because I think what happens to a lot of us too is like we start off as sensitive people. Like I started off as really sensitive, right? So what happens is that if you're more sensitive, you're more prone to anxiety. That's just how it works. And I think that what happens is that when you are that sensitive, you do read and feel other people, and you read and feel their pain, and it cycles on itself. And unless you have a way of kind of clearing that energy, it just builds up into this slush fund over the course of time. And one of my superpowers is being able to read people extremely well, but I'm not that great at reading myself. What I need, because when I was younger, it was really important for me to see the nuances of my dad. Like, was he starting to lose, was he starting to lose his mind? Because he would go in phases where he'd be fine, and then he would lose his mind. So I was always watching him and reading him as to whether or not he was going to lose his mind. So what I did was I got very, very good at reading external to me. And then all that energy went out as opposed to being able to read myself. So I lost the ability to kind of read my own feelings and and so that's why the anxiety came up. That's why it got so loud, which is basically saying, pick me up, like I need some attention here. And then I said, no, I need to work, I'm going to go be a doctor and help other people and not help myself. And
Yeah.
then my anxiety just got worse and worse and worse. So, and the people out there that are having anxiety that's worse and worse and worse, it's like you're doing something that is making you worse. Now, what is it? And what are you, and it leads me to this story, like, this is one of my favorite stories. I don't even know if it's true, but it's a story about how they catch monkeys. And apparently what they do is they put some bananas behind this kind of chicken wire fence. So a monkey can go up, he can go in, he can put his hand through the fence, he can grab the banana, but he can't get his hand back out because the hole was only big enough for his hand. It's not big enough for his hand and his banana. So basically what they do is they walk up to him and they just grab him because he will not release that banana. So I ask people, like, what's the banana in your life? Is it a relationship? Is it a job? Is it whatever? What's the banana that you're holding on to that's keeping you trapped in that particular place? And it's keeping you caught so that you're suffering, you're struggling. And it's really hard for people to release these things, because a lot of those things, like being a medical doctor for me, was a way of feeling important. It was a way of lowering my
Your
stress.
identity. Yeah.
Yeah. So if I'm not a doctor anymore, who am I? And I went through a real period there when I left practice of like, okay, who the hell am I? Right. So, but I knew I had to do it, and I'm glad that I did it now. But, I asked people, like, what's the banana? What are you holding on to?
Yeah, which is interesting for you because you do have the stand up and so many other interests. Like I know you're on the road. Like it's it's really powerful to hear you say that because you had multiple roles in a sense.
Career. Yeah. 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 I
Yeah.
can't stick with anything. That's why I've been married 3 times, right? Yeah. But, but
So-
on some level, that's true. And then, you mellow out as you get older and that kind of thing. And you sort of see, what is important. But what really is important, and what we were talking about earlier, is developing that relationship with yourself. And so many women you're so conditioned by society to give and give and give and give and give, that you, like, similar to me with my father, is like you lose that ability to read your own needs, because
yeah.
part of your identity, same with my identity as being a physician, is wrapped up in giving,
Yeah.
right?
Caretaking. Yep.
And then around 46 and a half, the freaking springs come off, and you go to Bali for a month because you can't stand it anymore. And just like, I gotta get out of here. I gotta break away. And it's really developing that relationship with yourself, and I
Yeah.
think that's really what it comes down to. Without sounding too Gandhi-esque, I
Yeah.
mean, that's really what it comes down to,
Yeah.
is developing relationship with yourself, and
Yeah.
and the darkest parts of yourself too, making friends with your shame.
Accepting.
Yeah, making friends with your shame is the one of the biggest things. Like, I deal with a lot of men and a lot of shame, and I have yet to meet a man who has a shameful story that I haven't heard before. I've heard them all. There's no new
Oh,
shames. There's only recycled ones. Like, I'm sure it's the same with women too. But there's no new shames. You're
yeah,
not.
we're all so identical.
Yeah,
It's amazing.
yeah,
It's very beautiful because
yeah,
at the end of the day, we're all the same.
yeah. You're not special. That's what I say. That's what I say.
Yeah.
I had a woman in probably about 6 months ago. She, a repeated affairs on her husband. Husband's a great guy and that kind of stuff. And the shame that she carried from that. But as a child, she never felt important. She was always seeking validation from outside of herself. And then as soon as she saw that part that needed validation from outside of herself, and it took a little while. It wasn't like it was instant, but there was an instant sort of revelation there. That, can you make friends with a part of you that feels you need affairs? And can you accept that part, and then not only accept it, can you love that part? Can you really love that part? Because that's what it needs. And then you
Where
can
the
kind of
true
build
healing
it.
is. Yeah.
So there's so much. On some levels we're so complicated, and other levels we're just so simple. We just want to be seen and heard. That's really all of us really want, because when we're seen and heard, we feel loved, and that's really what it comes down to. We feel connected.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and your heart. And I'm really excited to read your upcoming book. It's going to be out next year. Is that right?
April of 2020. Yeah, it's going
April
to be called the
2020.
Anxiety RX, or the
Okay.
Anxiety Prescription, or
And
whatever.
is your course available now
It is,
for
yeah.
people?
Identity Method online. It's pretty, it's pretty intense. So, like, that's one thing. If you're not ready to let your anxiety go, and I say that in the course too, is like, it is one of those things that anxiety is one of those things that it developed as a coping strategy for you. So, constant worry and constant vigilance developed as a coping strategy. So what I'm doing in the course is I'm taking away that coping strategy, which creates more anxiety. So you really have to do it. What you have to do is replace that thinking process with a feeling process that you're okay. And the course is really life-changing for a lot of people. But what I've heard back is it can charge you up. So if you're not really ready to abandon this coping strategy called anxiety,
Right.
then take it easy, develop some time, develop a connection with yourself first. And I'm on YouTube. All you have to do is like Google the Anxiety MD, and my YouTube and my Facebook and all that sort of stuff comes up.
Thanks for joining us on Beauty and the Mess. Feel free to visit Robin on Instagram at Robin_.